Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for being here. I thought we'd start by providing some updates on what we experienced before, during, and after the eclipse. And while I know we're all anxious to understand the economic impact, the full picture won't be clear for a while until some more data comes in from different sectors, like the rooms and meals tax. But we wanted to at least share what we know so far. So we'll have some preliminary traffic and other transportation data from Secretary Flynn, some economic anecdotes from Secretary Curley, and Director Forand will provide updates from the State Emergency Operations Center. But I first want to thank everyone from state and local officials to our small businesses and volunteers across the state who put on events for making Monday such an incredible, awe-inspiring day. Our team, along with many other partners, have been planning this for months, and there were a lot of unknowns. But from my perspective, the event lived up to the hype and then some. And I think it went about as well as we could have hoped, given the significant influx of visitors to our state. I think we all realize, we saw it for ourselves, there was a lot of traffic. Maybe more vehicles and people than we've ever seen in Vermont, especially in such a condensed time period. But it seems like most everyone was prepared and took it in stride. And fortunately, there were very few incidents and accidents on the road. Given the sheer number of vehicles we saw, that's very, very good news. In fact, far fewer than we experienced during last week's snowstorm. We were truly blessed to have such an incredible day. Personally, I wasn't quite sure what to expect when viewing the eclipse itself, but seeing the totality was much more powerful than I imagined. And it was more than just the spectacle of it. For a relatively short amount of time, hundreds of thousands of people across the state looked to the sky in wonder. People young and old from all walks of life all looked into the sky with amazement and shared a truly remarkable human event. These types of events don't happen often, so it's important to reflect on them when they do. And again, I'm so very proud of the many Vermonters and visitors we were able to put together and make the most of the moment. So with that, I'll turn it over to Secretary Flynn for more data and details.
Thank you, Governor. Good afternoon. Vermonters and our visitors were certainly treated to a spectacular eclipse. Everyone behaved tremendously on the highways, the waterways, and in the skies. The sheer volume of visitors, traffic, aircraft, and congestion, all with such low incidence as the governor mentioned, was nothing short of remarkable. On our highways, for the eclipse, AOT data analysts combined statistics using 29 counting stations around the state. They calculate the average daily traffic volume, and we started doing this for Friday. So Friday through Monday. Monday is not complete yet, so I want to caveat that everything I say now is still being further analyzed. But for all stations, April 23rd for that period compared to April 24th, traffic, we use the continuous counters, but we are seeing indications of an increase in vehicles of approximately 60,000. But again, I want to remind you that analysis is continued. And we look at a continuous traffic counter physically. We look at what that station did the year before. We look at what it did that day or in that period now. Where the analysis has to come in is understanding when a car enters Vermont, trips a counter, it could trip other counters in the state. So there's process that mathematicians and analysts use to try to decipher and sort out. So it is not a exact one-for-one every entry into the state. This is the tried and true traffic analysis procedures. Also, the modeling that we conducted with the University of Vermont indicates that traffic volume of that size are pointing towards 160,000 people. The modeling indicates, or the modelers, I should say, indicate 2.8 people per vehicle. On Monday, Interstate 89, from New Hampshire to exit 16 in Colchester. Northbound speeds on 89 began to decline between 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. and remained well below the averages until 2 p.m. This is northbound. The average speed for this section of the roadway was reduced by 28 miles per hour during the peak of pre-eclipse travel. Full recovery for northbound began to be observed between 3 and 4 p.m. Peak congestion on the northbound side of 89 occurred between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. Southbound travel experienced immediate post-eclipse impacts, taking until 2 a.m. Tuesday, April 9th, to return to normal speed. We can measure the speeds on the interstate. The average speed for this section of roadway was reduced by 47 miles per hour immediately following the eclipse, and the lowest average speed noted on this segment of the road was 5 miles per hour. Interstate 91 from the Massachusetts border to Newport started to see falling speeds between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m., with recovery beginning between 1 and 2 p.m. and full recovery by 4 p.m. Again, this was northbound 91. The average speed in this section of the roadway was reduced by 25 miles per hour prior to the eclipse, and peak congestion for I-91 northbound occurred between 11 and 2 on Monday. Southbound I-91 travel was also immediately impacted post-eclipse, with speeds returning to normal again by 2 a.m. Tuesday, April 9th. The average speed for this section of the interstate was reduced by 38 miles per hour immediately following the eclipse, and the lowest average speed noted on this stretch of I-89 was 9 miles per hour. And as some people stayed over Monday, we did see heavier southbound traffic on the interstates yesterday, but nothing at all like Monday afternoon or Monday evening. Again, with all the increase in traffic, there were only 10 reported crashes on Monday. To put this into perspective, just how few that really is, especially given the volume. During the recent snowstorm on March 22-23, AOT was involved in 6 crashes, all of which we were struck by others. Let me speak about aviation for a minute. For the entire week last year, the Burlington International Airport reported 201 inbound aircraft. This past Monday only, state-owned airports parked 248 inbound aircraft that day. Northeast Kingdom International had the most with 91, followed by Franklin County with 51, Knapp with 42, Morrisville Stowe with 21, 18 at Rutland, 17 at Caledonia, 3 at Middlebury and Springfield, and 2 at Bennington. For the 30 minutes immediately following the eclipse, 2 planes departed state-owned airports every 60 seconds. They didn't stay long. In Barton, a northbound freight train struck 1 car at an intersection, and a second car parked too close to the track, and in turn that second car struck a third car. There were minor injuries, and it could have been much worse. Never park too close to train tracks. And in Caledonia, 1 plane did put a wheel off the ditch upon landing, and that aircraft was cleared immediately. A few other closing tidbits. We have a device that we placed in the median near the Winooski River Bridge that sort of senses an orb in the area, if you will. And it appears as though folks in that area were very well organized and well planned for their eclipse viewing, because traffic in that area nearly subsided totally. Our device only measured 40 automobiles in the entire bubble during the eclipse. In the minutes following the eclipse, that rose to 100, and within 60 minutes it peaked at 650. So it just emphasizes, no matter where a person was, it seems as though the vast majority of people were trying to safely be able to view the eclipse, which is awesome. And as we thought, returning viewers from the Pittsburgh, New Hampshire area hopped off New Hampshire Route 3 into Canaan, Vermont, and down Vermont Route 102 and Vermont Route 114, as those roads saw much heavier traffic than usual. On our network, Route 100 at the I-89 exit 10 Waterbury exit was congested as we expected, and as was the I-91 bridge project in Westminster. That was a one-lane situation. There was no avoiding that, and we expected we would have delays there. AOT crews were out to 11 p.m., and after that they were placed on an on-call basis, but no further required presence. So that is my report, and I turn it over to Secretary Curley.
Thank you, Secretary Flynn. Thank you, Governor, and thank you to all Vermonters for your incredible patience and hard work. It paid off. We threw a great eclipse. I'm incredibly proud and honored that so many people chose Vermont to view the Great American Eclipse, and that we, as Vermonters, came together to be such gracious hosts. Who would have thought last year, when we started planning for April 8th, 2024, that Vermont would have some of the best weather in the nation to view this historic event? What a gift. Thousands of Vermonters spent months making sure it would be a safe and welcoming event, and it was. Thank you to everyone behind the scenes, the Vermont Department of Tourism and Marketing, Vermont Emergency Management, VTrans, the National Weather Service, Forest Parks and Recreations, Buildings and Grounds, Radio Technology Services, our healthcare providers, our public safety officials on the state and the local level, all of whom and more worked together to ensure a successful, safe, and long weekend for all of us. I'm filled with pride that so many of our neighbors chose to drive here to share this experience with us. Yes, as you've heard, there was traffic, but that was expected. Travelers were prepared, and as you've heard, everything went well. We also had an incredible number of people who flew here to witness the eclipse. As a cabinet member, I watched the eclipse from the Dill Building in Berlin. Transportation Secretary Flynn and I walked across the street to the Knapp Airport after, and I grew up in this area, and I can tell you, I have never seen so many airplanes parked on that runway in my entire life. Everyone that we spoke with was so engaging and happy to be here, and we, of course, let them know how happy we were to have them here as well. Not only was this eclipse a profound and incredible visual display of wonder and beauty, it also presented an incredible economic opportunity for our state. April typically is the slowest time of the year for tourism in Vermont, and we saw a significant boost as the Great American Eclipse drew people to our downtowns, our shorelines, our ski areas, filling our hotel rooms and our restaurants. There will be more concrete economic data on the impact of the eclipse weekend to share in the future. We're employing various strategies to get as complete an economic picture as possible. While some data is readily available, like you just heard, other data, like tax data, takes a little longer to come through for us. So when that does become available, we are as anxious as anyone to analyze that data and to report on it. But for now, what we can tell you is that our economy here in the state benefited, and for that, again, we are incredibly grateful. As you well know, Vermont businesses have been through the ringer. From COVID to last summer's flooding, they faced immense challenges. But time and again, Vermonters have dug deep and showed up for our business community, supporting businesses during COVID by shopping online or taking their meals via takeout. And again, just last summer when historic floods crippled our downtowns, our residents again showed up to muck out basements and rebuild shuttered businesses, even offering temporary locations and solutions to businesses who were facing more prolonged closures so that they could generate much needed income. During difficult times, Vermonters are resilient and they show up for each other. This weekend wasn't difficult. It was beautiful and it was unforgettable because we showed up for each other by being welcoming and patient. Beyond the immediate economic impact, being in the path of totality for this eclipse allowed Vermont to build our brand awareness in a way that even the most robust marketing budget couldn't achieve. Everyone will remember where they were as they watched the moon pass in front of the sun. And because our guests had a fantastic experience in Vermont, they're more likely to return. And for those who couldn't make it to our state, live national media coverage allowed people across the country to experience totality on Burlington's waterfront. So thank you again to all Vermonters for helping the Green Mountain State shine during this historic and breathtaking event. And with that, I will turn it over to Director Forend.
Good afternoon, thanks for being here. I want to talk briefly about the state's response to the eclipse. For planning purposes, the State Emergency Operations Center increased its activation level to a partial activation on March 25th. And yesterday morning, once traffic returned to normal and there were no remaining resource requests, it returned to the monitoring status. Leading up to the event, we began to see traffic increase starting Friday and continuing through Sunday. With the travelers spread out over those 3 days, though, we experienced no issues with our capabilities to handle the increased number of visitors. On Monday, as expected, we saw a large increase in traffic with visitors that had made the decision to drive up for the day. This increase in visitors did cause some delays through the morning and up until the event. As anticipated, a large number of eclipse watchers left immediately after the total eclipse was complete, and this caused significant reduction of speeds on the interstate. And those specifics came from Secretary Flynn. 16 welcome centers on the interstate had a total of 34,007 visitors entering their facilities. For reference, last October on Indigenous Peoples Day, the welcome centers saw around 12,000. This spike in visitors put a strain on the water systems at the welcome centers in Sharon, Lyndonville, and Williston. So EOC coordinated delivery of water to Sharon and Williston. Lyndonville had to reduce traffic at that time, so we closed it. They had all been equipped with extra portable restrooms ahead of Monday, so there were working restrooms for visitors throughout the day at each location, even given the water issues. The Vermont Alert Eclipse Message Group that we created at the State Emergency Operations Center on Monday morning had 10,708 visitors. The SEOC used this group to send out 7 messages specifically to that group, and 3 of those messages were asked for by local municipalities. We had no other resource requests from municipalities during this event. Thank you. Turn it back to the governor.
Thank you, Eric. We'll open up to questions.
Joe, sorry to be dense, but if I want to be able to tell people, here's your best guess for how many people drove into Vermont to see the eclipse, what's the answer?
What we're saying right now, Peter, is between the time we started measuring on Friday through now, through early Monday, which is not complete, we're looking at approximately 60,000 vehicles. And modelers working with us at UVM say it's 2.8 people per vehicle. Of course, we can't count every single vehicle. So that calculates to 160,000. But as has been said, all of this work continues, and there probably will be a circle back and true up on several data sets, in the weeks to come.
And you used a baseline for the air traffic comparison, as BTB. Do you know what the state airport traffic numbers looked like last year in comparison to what you saw on Monday?
We know, because we wouldn't have thought last year to just go around and count incoming planes on a whim. We were not including people who have aircraft that are already sited at our airport. So the numbers that I gave you were new incremental inbound aircraft. But we get weekly reports from Burlington International. So that 201 is a hard number.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What about Amtrak or train traffic?
The Amtrak trains were full for, I believe, 3 days in and out of Vermont.
And is that typical with this?
We see that in the fall. We see that often when students are coming back to college, and we see spikes during foliage season. And on the Ethan Allen in particular now, from New York City into Burlington, we often would see that during some really peak winter holiday weekends. But over a sustained number of days like that, it's unusual.
And Peter, just as a reminder, those are those triggers that count the cars coming into the state. It doesn't account for all the Vermonters who are traveling around the state to get here and get to different places as well. So when you hear the 60,000 number, it doesn't sound like when you're seeing it, doesn't sound like that's enough, but that doesn't really count the Vermont vehicles. Correct?
Correct, and it also, I think, if I may, you have to realize too, a lot of people stayed put. A lot of Vermonters that day stayed put too. So, you know, some moved around. Some of those inbound cars also hit those, you know, continuous counters in other places. But, you know, as the governor said, it doesn't include the totality. That's why it just takes a little more time to get this more refined. But that 60,000 is the approximated number we're going with thus far.
The other interesting thing that I saw that day was when we saw the high cloud watching traffic out, and even kingdom better view. So even air traffic and mobile traffic.
Governor, where
That it was a intense moment. Any revelations to speak of? Any moments of?
No, it was just, you know, having everyone watching one phenomenon at the same time, you know, everyone taking the time to see it, I think was inspiring in some respects, and knowing that this is, for us, maybe a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, was reflective. So it was pretty special, and considering, again, the odds of us having a clear day on April 8th, I guess is in the 20 percentile. So we're fortunate to have a clear day, and when you're seeing rainstorms in Texas and all the way up through, it's pretty special to be in the Northeast.
Is your staff tracking the revotes of the school budgets? And at least 4 that I know of have said no a second time. Are you tracking that? And if so, what are you concluding?
I'm sure the media is tracking as well. So we are taking all that in. I think South Burlington maybe voted that down last night again, but I don't know all the schools that have had revotes thus far and what the results were.
How closely have you been able to familiarize yourself with the proposal that's looks like it might be coming out of Ways and Means on Friday?
I was alerted, I think Friday. The speaker had said that there was something coming out this week. I didn't know the details and wasn't sure which day. So I was alerted last night that it was coming out today, or coming out yesterday. And so I have a brief had a brief overview of that, and we met again this morning. And you know, good news, maybe not concerning news as well. The good news is they have something on the table, and that looks at and acknowledging that we have a severe structural problem with our education system. So that's good news. The concerning aspect for me is that it really doesn't do anything about the property tax increase this year. And from the Vermonters that I encounter throughout the state, that's their biggest concern, is how am I going to pay my taxes? And how am I going to get through this? And so we'll be meeting again today internally and coming up with some sort of response so that we can voice our concerns with what we're seeing, but acknowledging as well the good news that there's something on the table that looks at this over a long period of time.
Are your concerns exclusive to the timeline, or do you also question the viability of sort of the concept they're looking at?
There's bits and pieces of both, but I would say overall, I'm not objecting to what they came up with. I think there's some pieces they could add to it that they may have considered and didn't adopt, and that's where we would maybe come in. But as well, it's more the timing of it. I feel as though Vermonters need relief now, today, not 2, 3, 4 years from now. And the other part that concerns me is I've been around this building long enough to know, there's going to be a new legislature coming in next year, and so you don't know what they're going to do with this. They don't have to do anything. We've seen it with PCBs this year even. I mean, you don't have to follow through on what you start. So they could put this all into place, and next year they could ignore it. So I'm concerned about that aspect as well.
And what specifically can we expect to see from your administration in terms of a response? Are you talking about a white paper, issue brief, that sort of
Probably
thing?
just a brief statement and maybe some suggestions of what we'd like to see.
Earlier this year, you said you wouldn't be, I think you said you wouldn't be opposed to raising new revenues if there was systemic reform for our Fed funding formula here. If we were to raise new revenues, what would you propose? What would you like to see? Where would it come from?
Yeah, I'm not proposing raising new revenues at this point in time. I think we do have to look at the structural issues with education funding and the structural foundation of the education system itself before we raise any revenue to support that. What I was talking about was whether some had talked about going to an income-based approach, and I'd said, that's fine, but we're just raising more revenue, additional revenue to throw at the problem has been the issue for a number of years. That's been the reaction, like just keep throwing more money at it, and it doesn't fix the foundational problems. So we have to do it concurrently, or better yet, fix the foundation first before we put more money into the house above it.
Governor, yesterday the House committee that's been investigating whether to move ahead with impeachment for the Franklin County Sheriff released its final report, and they, as I'm sure you know, recommended to not move forward with impeachment. They also called on the sheriff to resign, which I think the State Sheriff's Association has also called for previously. What's your reaction to the committee's findings, and would you also call on the sheriff to resign now?
I think they came to the right conclusion, the right decision in terms of both issuing the report and doing their investigation, but then coming to the realization that impeachment is a very, very high bar. I think I mentioned that in one of our press briefings over the last year. So, and it should be. These are positions that are the voters of, in this case, Franklin County, have made their decision. They were fully aware of the situation. You all reported on it. I don't think anyone who was voting in that election didn't know what had happened. So you have to honor that aspect. I said from the very beginning that I didn't think he should run, and I voiced that. And I think he should do what's right for his constituents, for Franklin County, and step down. It's going to be very difficult for him to continue, but I'm not expecting him to resign. That's his decision to make. And then the voters will decide on their own.
Governor, what do you make of some of the proposals that have been floating around this building, setting some parameters around qualifications for county-wide officials? Like, Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's been some proposals to say that sheriffs, for instance, have to be licensed law enforcement officers. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind putting parameters and some of those types of issues on the table. And I'd look to the sheriffs and state's attorneys to the department to weigh in on that. And so I'm not opposed to that.
The House's long-term affordable housing bill has appropriations for all kinds of different initiatives. Like, Do you support those in concept? Do you think that the
Well, I think we can agree we need more housing. I think that's something we can agree to. Raising more revenue to, especially to that magnitude, I just don't think it's realistic. We'll see what the Senate does with it. I would be surprised if they adopted all of that.
There's, some people say, well, if you want to decrease the state's reliance on hotel housing, then you need to have a plan like this in place to do that. What do you make of that?
Well, again, I think our plan had a lot of merit as well, and I think S311 has a lot of merit, and I think providing for tax incentives as well as regulatory relief is part of the answer, and could solve as many problems as they are going to solve, at least in the short term. Their plan is quite a number of years out. We need relief, just like we were talking with the other issue. We need relief right now, just like education funding. In this situation, the housing crisis, we need relief immediately. So I don't see that theirs provides for that.
Got a few folks on the phone, then we'll come back to the room. We'll start with Tim McQuiston, Vermont Business Magazine.
Hi, Governor. As you know, Vermont Teddy Bear has been acquired by the folks who own Vermont Flannel, but they have not said anything about what's happening to the larger part of the company, which is Pajamagram and the apparel division. Has your administration heard anything from the new owner, the investment firm, on possible layoffs or anything like that?
I'll refer to Secretary Curley on that. I personally have not heard anything as to where they go from here, but maybe she has something.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Tim. I did speak with the CEO of Vermont Teddy Bear last week on the day of the closing, and it is my understanding that a separate company purchased, I don't have the name off the top of my head, but purchased the other three portions of the business, and that their intention was to continue operating in Vermont, and that they, at this point, there was no news of layoffs or plans to pull out of Vermont.
All right, thank you, Lindsay.
Chris Roy, Newport Daily Express.
Yeah, hi. I'm just wondering if anybody knows yet on how the telecommunication system worked during the eclipse, if there are any problems. I know it's up here in Newport that the service seemed to degrade a little bit before, during, and after the event.
Eric, do you have anything on that? Any reports?
Yeah, we had no reports of any of the communication systems going down. There was some small degradation up in the Northeast Kingdom, but nothing significant and nothing that caused any issues or any delaying of calls to 911.
And we didn't deploy any of our assets in terms of...
We deployed a small CRD up to St. Johnsbury for FirstNet, first responders, but that was it.
what's a CRD?
Compact, ready deployable. It's a little mini cell tower.
Got it.
Thank you.
Tom, Compass Vermont.
No questions today. Thank you very much for a job well done throughout Vermont.
Thank you, Tom.
Keith, Rutland Herald.
Hi, yeah, I was reading somewhere that Goddard College is planning to close at the end of this semester, and I'm wondering if, just with all the other college closures we've had the past couple of years, if that's raising any alarm bells or concerns or anything along those lines.
Yeah, obviously, anytime any entity closes or leaves Vermont, it's an issue and gets our attention. This one was probably not as surprising. They've been experiencing financial distress for a number of years. We knew that they were going to online only at the end of this semester, but again, we're not sure what this will mean for us, what they're going to do with the campus. We will try to engage with them. We have, obviously, we have housing needs throughout Central Vermont, throughout Vermont in its entirety, and we'll work with them to see if there's any other good fits, both from a corporate standpoint and from a housing standpoint. So, but I have no idea at this point what they're going to do with the facility.
Thank you. Just kind of connected to that, I'm wondering if there's anybody in the state government that's kind of been following like what's happening with these college properties after they close. I mean, obviously we can follow the individual ones here and there, but is there any like just overall looking at that and how just to keep track of what's happening with those campuses or?
Yeah. Obviously, our Agency of Commerce and Community Development has been actively working with many of those entities to find a way to encourage other corporate entities to come in or to utilize it in some way.
Yeah.
Secretary Gurley?
I wouldn't have more to add other than what the governor said. And Keith, if you want to take it offline, I can give you a more broad description of maybe some of the things that are, as the governor mentioned, some of the ideas and opportunities that may exist on some of those campuses.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay.
That's all we have.
Corey, Vermont Public. Corey? All right, we're back to the room.
Governor, not to get ahead of tomorrow's news, but members of your administration are going to be talking about the AHEAD model application, sort of the next iteration of healthcare reform. Just from your perspective, where, if at all, is the all-payer model falling short? Why change?
Well, it's the federal government has initiated this AHEAD model, and it takes off from the all-payer model, and have been engaged with many other states, in Vermont in particular, about what works, what doesn't, and they've come up with this model that they want us to transition to. So it isn't dissimilar from the all-payer model we have now. In fact, it just transitions to something a little bit different, but it's their model.
Costs are still going up. Green Mountain Care Board approving double-digit rate hikes for insurance companies and for hospital budgets. What's your confidence level that our reform efforts will be able to bend the curve before people are priced out?
Yeah, I think, we suffer here in Vermont and in the Northeast in particular from our demographics, as I've talked about over the last decade. And this impacts healthcare costs as well. We're older. The older we get, the more we utilize. So we need a younger, healthier population to pay into the system. And when you see some of the demographics, the shifts, I've used, since the last census or so, we've lost 11,000 kids under 18. And when you see the meat of the workforce, we've lost 28,000 out of that category. And then when you look over 65, we've added 48,000. So that tells you everything you need to know about the direction we're going. That's why we need to encourage, bring more people into the state, working age population, to help ramp down, bring down the cost of healthcare. Because it's no secret, the younger, healthier population pays into the system and helps those of us getting to the other end.
Kevin from 7 Days is having mic problems, so we put a question in the chat, so I'll just read it verbatim. Can Governor Scott please describe the process for appointing a replacement to Senator Mazza and how quickly he intends to do so?
We did send out yesterday a notice to the Democratic Committee in Grand Isle County asking for 3 names, as well as to Colchester, the Democratic Committee in Colchester. It's a unique district for him. Colchester obviously is in Chittenden County, and then he represents Grand Isle County. So we thought it was important, he thought it was important to find out who might want to take the seat in both those areas. So we thought this was the best way to do so. We sent out a notice to them, and they both responded that they received it, and they'll be working on that. We did as well, while I'm at it, we sent out a notice in Burlington to the new mayor's former seat, to both the Democratic Party and the Progressive Party, because she was endorsed by both.
Does the senator have any strong feelings about who he'd like to replace him?
He hasn't said at this point in time. He'd like to see who steps up, and I'm sure that he'll have an opinion on that.
And will you be taking your cue from him?
I will listen to what he has to say. Yes, I mean, I will confer with him. I think that's the least we can do.
Are you looking for someone who would commit not to run for re-election, or would you be open to that?
I'm just looking for the best person to represent the county the way he did.
Will that seat be filled by the end of the current legislative session?
I mean, we will, until we receive names, there's not much we can do. Then we'll have to go through the interview process and come to some conclusions. It could, depending on maybe when they're going to adjourn, but it all depends on a number of different factors. We'll work as quickly as we can when we receive names.
Governor, the Senate has a bill S-18 on their calendar today. Any thoughts on their action on that despite your veto?
I haven't, I don't know what they're going to do. We'll see when and if they take the vote. It's on the calendar for, I didn't even know it was on the calendar, for action today in the Senate. I'd say they must think they have the votes then to override. All right, thank you very much.
I think whenever you can do it, automatically goes to the notice calendar, just sits there.
It'll be there for a while.
Yeah.
Oh,
It cannot take.
it's not up for action.
It's just on the calendar.
Okay. I thought they were.
No.
Got it.